PDF of a paper. That's okay. I just see that we started recording. Oh, okay. And the paper that I will be talking about today is my latest publication from 2022. It only got published about 2 weeks ago, so it's really, hot off the press. And the paper is called Status Consumption and Charitable Donations, the Power of Empowerment. And this is an interesting paper because it's actually a part of my dissertation. So when I was at the University of Central Florida, I conducted a 2-essay dissertation, meaning, it entailed kind of like 2 parts. And I'm now trying, obviously, to publish both of them. And so this is the first one of them. So I'm very proud that, it got published just recently. So as for the agenda today, I will try not to take a lot of time. I was planning to do this lecture for about 25 to 30 minutes. It can also be a little longer if you have questions. There's not a problem. So first, I would like to discuss the findings of this paper and some theorizing, behind it. I also wanted to highlight that this paper is co-authored with my PhD advisor, Dr. Zin He. So I'm not the only author here. After that, I wanted to briefly talk about the publication process. So maybe the timeline, of how this paper got published, like how long it took us, from the time that we submitted it to the journal until it actually appeared online. I also wanted to mention a few resources that I find very helpful for PhD students and young academics, because I know that some of you might be, in their PhD program at the moment, or we might have some faculty members joining. So I wanted to share some resources that I find really helpful, for and also young faculty members. And at the end, of course, we will also have time for a Q&A session. So let me start with the paper. And again, I just want to remind you that if you are interested in reading the whole paper and you cannot access this, don't hesitate to contact me, and I can share the paper with you. So it's called Status Consumption and Charitable Donations, the Power of Empowerment. So first, before talking about status consumption, let's start with status, like what it is, the definition, why it is important. So status is defined as a person's relative position in a society. What I mean by that, if you imagine this in a metaphorical way, just imagine like a ladder, right? As I'm picturing here, and your status is your position on that ladder. Okay, so where you are positioned there. I think that would be a nice pictorial depiction of this. Research also found that status is a fundamental human motive, meaning that all of us in one way or another are craving status. So it's very natural for people to try to be as high as possible on that ladder, right? We all want to have high status. Now, status can be achieved in 3 basic ways. One is by assignment. So this means that you are given status by assignment. For example, if you are born, into a rich family or into a royal family, you don't have to do much for it. You are just born with this high status, so you are very lucky. The second way is status, which can be gained by achievement. So this means that you really, do something, you have to put some effort to achieve this status. For example, you study hard, you become a professor, and you get high status, or, you work hard, you become a CEO of a company, you get high status. That would be status by achievement. And then you can also gain status by consumption. So by consuming specific products or services that will make you gain high status, or at least, there will be the perception that you have this high status if you are consuming those certain products, such as, luxury handbags, for example. And status by consumption is what I'm focusing on in my research in this paper, and also, in some other papers that I have. And this consumption, as the name suggests, is called status consumption, right? So it's the consumption of products and or services that will confer status on the consumer of these products or services, right? Why is this important? Why do we even study status consumption? Well, a big part of status consumption is the consumption of luxury products, which are often, consumed in order to achieve that status. And it's a really, really big market. As you can see here, I'm depicting a graph here that shows the value of the personal luxury goods market worldwide, and how it was basically increasing between 1996 to 2021, with some exceptions. You can see that, for example, in 2009, there was a decline because of the worldwide economic and financial crisis. And again, another steep decline we could see in 2020 because of COVID. But other than that, you can see that it's pretty much increasing. And the value of that market in 2021 was 283 billion euros worldwide. So really, an important industry to study. Now, the conventional wisdom, so what the literature is also showing us, is that consumption of status products is viewed as self-centered and narcissistic, right? So if you buy and use, as I said, like luxury handbags, some branded clothes, other status products and services, other people tend to view you as like self-centered person who only cares about him or herself. And this is very often contrasted with other behavior, which obviously is very focused on other people and on the welfare of other people. And that's charitable donation behavior, right? Because if you donate to charity, this typically means, that you care about other people, you want to help them, and not only about other people, it can be charitable causes that are helping animals, for example, etc. Right? But the conventional wisdom is that in that case, you are really other focused, so focus on others, not really about, on yourself. And this is also one reason why status consumption has often been contrasted with charitable donation in the literature, in the academic literature, which treats these two behaviors, so status consumption and charitable donation, as opposing ends, meaning that consumers either engage in status consumption or they engage in charitable donation behavior. Okay, so really the opposing ends of a spectrum. But, in this research, we try to look into the connection between these two behaviors to see if there is any connection, right, between status consumption and charitable donation behavior, apart from the fact that, yes, some might see them as opposing ends. And also, the second kind of sub-question was whether status consumption could increase charitable donation behavior. So in other words, whether a behavior that is seen as self-centered could lead to another behavior that is other-centered, right? So centered or on other people. So in other words, once I engage in status consumption, how will that affect, whether and how much I will donate to a charitable cause? So these were basically, that was basically the research question that we tried to answer in this research. What we found in the literature when we started studying, these two phenomena was that status consumption, so again, consumption of luxury products such as, maybe luxury handbags, branded clothes, etc., tends to empower consumers. What do I mean by empowerment? Well, it's basically a process that motivates people to accomplish specific tasks And one of the key components of empowerment is self-efficacy, right? Self-efficacy means that you feel like you can accomplish specific tasks, like you can do it. You have the ability, you have the motivation to do something. You have the motivation and ability to change things through your own actions, right? And the academic literature is showing us that status consumption can lead to empowerment, so make people feel like they can make difference through their own actions, that they can accomplish tasks. And on the other hand, we also found in the literature that empowerment can lead to prosocial behavior, right? Prosocial behavior can entail different things, but charitable donation behavior, of course, is also considered a prosocial behavior because it benefits other people. So based on on this literature and those prior findings that we discovered, we predicted that status consumption, when compared to just a non-status or regular consumption of just like non-status products, would empower consumers, and as a result of that, they will increase their charitable donation behavior, right? So as you can see in this graph, this is a very basic prediction that we made here. In this paper, basically status consumption leads to empowerment leads to donation, and therefore status consumption leads to increased charitable donation behavior. So that was the main prediction that we made. We also discovered some boundary conditions in the paper, so the conditions under which this effect holds, and the conditions under which it would get turned off or like wiped away, and they were so-called consumption status. So really we examined whether this effect holds also if consumers just own or like simply own a status product, or if consumption of that product is necessary for this effect to occur. And we found that yes, you actually have to consume that status product for the effect to take place. So it's if you engage in non-consumption, meaning you only own the product, the effect will not be there. We also looked at the nature of status consumption, having versus wanting. What do we mean by that? Having status consumption means that you engage in status consumption, and wanting status consumption, it's only about like desire to engage in it. So we were wondering if it's enough that you only have a desire to engage in status consumption, or if it's really the engagement in status consumption that drives the effect. And it was really only the engagement or having status consumption that would drive the effect, and not purely the desire to do so. And we also looked at power distance belief, and we found that this effect only holds for people who have relatively low power distance belief, and not for those I just described in 6 studies, which are reported directly in the paper, plus one extra study that we reported in the supporting information appendix. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to discuss all the studies here today, because if you are interested in that, you can read that in detail in the paper. So yes, just let me know if you are interested in that, so you can take a look at that. And charitable for donation booth to be positioned near status consumers. So for example, in the proximity so charitable donations might want to team up with firms specializing in luxury products to jointly promote pro-social causes, right? Based on what we find in this paper. So that was about it in a nutshell regarding the paper itself. Let me briefly describe the publication process for those of you who might be interested. Maybe some of you are maybe like MBA students, this might not interest you unless, of course, you want to pursue your PhD in the future. But I think this might be more interesting for those of you who are academics, if we have any academics in the audience. So maybe some PhD students or faculty members. So this was the timeline. We made an initial submission to Psychology and Marketing on July 7th last year. Then we actually received two major revisions for this paper. So the first one, August. To like run a new study, so that's why it was a major revision again. That happened on December 11th last year. Again, we resubmitted the paper, and then the review team was happy with the paper, so they accepted it on February 26th this year. And then not long after that, the paper got published online. So that's the history of the paper here. What were some of the major changes we had to do in the paper? Again, that might be of interest to the academics among you. So the major changes that were asked to be made by the review team was to make a very clear distinction in the paper between empowerment versus power. So, we had to really conceptually and theoretically distinguish between those two concepts, which do not exactly refer to the same thing. And if you read the paper, you will see that empowerment, is a dynamic motivational process versus power, which is like a static state, which in and by itself may not be motivational. And we also rule it out as an alternative explanation in the paper, among other things. So we had to make that argument on a theoretical basis, and also in terms of empirical package, because reviewers wanted us to clearly rule out power as an alternative explanation and really show that this entire thing that we are suggesting is driven by empowerment. So as part of that, they ask us to replace the original studies 2 and 3 that were in the paper with new ones. So we had to rerun those studies. So for example, the new study 2 that now appears in the paper has an improved study design. It also rules out many different alternative explanations. And this study also uses actual donations, which was also an important part of that study. And the new study 3, which is now reported in the paper, also has improved study design. It rules out power specifically as an alternative explanation. And on the other hand, we were also asked to remove one study from the paper. So in the original version, there was study 7 in our manuscript that we conducted with students in a classroom setting, but the review team didn't like it very much. So they asked us to remove it. So that was it about the paper. Let me now very briefly talk about some resources that I personally find helpful, especially for PhD students and young academics, and more specifically in marketing, because that's my discipline where I am in. But at the same time, some of these resources I think can be also helpful for academics in like related or other disciplines. So here are some videos that I like to watch, and I think they're extremely helpful. So these are the webinars that were recorded and posted on YouTube by the Academy of Marketing Science on different topics, as you can see, tips for navigating the academic job market, networking tips for doctoral students. So very, very interesting. They each last about an hour. And here is a link. So I know that you are recording this presentation. So of course, later on, you can rewatch it, and if you forget, where to find these videos. And also some other videos that I found very helpful and that I like to watch are the ones by DocSIC AMA. DocSIC is a special interest group of doctoral students, which which works in conjunction with AMA, which is the American Marketing Association. So it's one of the interest groups of American Marketing Association, and they also posted some very very interesting videos and webinars on YouTube, including like how to publish in best marketing journals. So like really some very specific solid advice there, how to develop research topics, how to network in academia. So I discovered those resources just recently after graduating from a PhD program. So I wish I had known about this when I was still a PhD student, because it would have been very helpful, to have access to these resources back then. I'm not associated in any way, with any of these specific organizations. So I'm not part of DocSIC or I'm not an AMS member. So that's not why I'm promoting those. I just find them really helpful. So that's why I wanted to bring those to your attention. Also some books that I read and that I find particularly helpful for PhD students, especially toward the end of their PhD studies and for young faculty members. So the first one is called The Professor is In, the Essential Guide to Turning Your PhD into a Job. I found that quite helpful when I was on the job market, even though, as a caveat, I have to say it's written by a person who is not in marketing. She's in a different discipline. So some of the advice that she's giving here might not apply to us in marketing or in business more broadly, but still, there was some advice that I found helpful. So that's especially helpful for PhD students. And the other one, Tenure Hacks, I think is especially helpful for junior faculty who are trying to get tenure. Now, I don't know whether tenure exists in India, because in some countries it doesn't. But for example, in the US, we have tenure. So yeah, I think this is also very, very helpful resource, on how to gain the tenure, what to do, what not to do when you are a young academic, such as assistant professor. And again, it was written by a person who's not in marketing. He actually is a lawyer, so he's I think a PhD in law. But again, some advice, can be applied to our discipline as well, because it's more general. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about today. I think we are right on time. So if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to take them now.
Yes. Good morning, Sona. This is Professor Uma.
Hello,
Yeah,
Professor.
yeah. My question